welcome to Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. I am your co-host, JP, John Paz, from the Two-Man Power Trip. And, of course, joining me is the star of the show, the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, the mind and booker behind the 83 Weeks of Dominance and the NWO, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in the history of the business, the Games Master, the Taskmaster, the Devil himself, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, John. How are you doing, JP?
Doing pretty good. I can't complain. Seems to be, I know it seems to be you might be healthier than I am, though.
Yeah, because my annual physical, my blood pressure was 112/57. The guy said, you're going to be around for a while so I can haunt people, I guess.
I love it. And I think we should get right into it, like the great topic today, because it is all about the immortal Hulk Hogan, the Hulkster, Hollywood Hogan. I feel like there's a lot of the meat on the bone as far as you and the Hulkster are concerned. So when did you actually first meet Hulk?
I used to go see him play at the Rocket Lounge in Tampa. The rest of us would go to a couple of different places in Tampa. And I saw Hogan and his band when he was playing bass.
How was it?
They were good. And later on, I saw him in Dothan, Alabama. He asked me I had just gone in for a shot, and he asked me, can you ride with me? I said, sure. So he was saying to me, I think I'm going to quit. I said, what are you, fucking crazy? You just threw a big house with Howie Race in the stadium, and he got fucked on the payoff. I said, kid, don't worry about this payoff because you're going to make it big. Little did I know, change the business. But we were close for a long time. In fact, when his father was dying, I went to his father's hospital room. And his father had been kind of laying there and didn't talk to anybody. When he saw me, he jumped up out of his pillows. He said, do me a favor, will you? I said, what's that? He said, I like when you smack him around. He should have been smacked around as a kid. And Hulk said, the old man never jumped up out of bed until he saw me. His father, Pete, was a wonderful guy. Wonderful, wonderful guy. And a lot of people have not talked, including me. But he came from a very good family. And he took care of his family, too. So there's a, flip side to Hulk, too. He was very loyal to his mother and father. Took care of him. In fact, he bought them a big home, right? But his father lived in what they called a cracker home. And after he bought the big home, his father would go and sleep like 4 or 5 days at the cracker home. So he wouldn't forget where he came from. And his mother was a very gracious lady. She was probably younger than I am now. But she was a raven-haired beauty, and she had class. And they instilled something in Hulk because, his brother had been murdered. And they were really protective of him. And his brother was the vice president of the Oakland chapter in L.A. That's why he drew all those bikers around the country. So we can knock him all we want, but he came from a tough side of town. His brother went the other way. Thank God Hulk didn't. And he was very good to his parents, so there's a lot of good in Hulk. And a lot of times we don't see that. He was very good to his nephews and nieces. Anytime he had a big party, they were always invited to the New Year's Eve party. I went over 3 or 4 times. I actually got a tuxedo to go over one of them. And I had to pin it up because at that time I was a lot bigger. And he was a gracious, gracious host to all the boys. So there's a flip side to Hulk, too.
I'm a big Hogan fan. Love the Hulkster. But there was a point in time where, I mean, I guess he was also a fan, right? I mean, when he was playing bass, he always talked about how he knew about you and Dusty and the Florida territory. So would he go to the shows?
Yeah, he went to all the shows. And like I said, his father said to me, smack him around. I should have done it more. And his father was still not completely smart to the business. And I said to him, well, Pete, I'm going to do what you should have done. And he said, yeah, I love it. Smack him around. So he was and his father wasn't a big guy, but he had hands like Hulk. He looked like, you see Rob Gronkowski?
Mm-hmm.
You ever see his hands, Rob Gronkowski's hands?
Huge.
He looks like he has 2 grills rather than hands. And that's how his father was. His father couldn't have been more than 5'7". But he had these huge hands. And the Hogan head, too. Mm-hmm. Very nice parents. And I told him, when his father died, I said, you were a good son. And he was. So there is a different side to Hogan that a lot of us don't know. But he was very loyal to his guys, too. You know what I mean? Whether it was Tugboat, John Tenta, the Nasty Boys, and a host of other guys. When we said he brought them to WCW. So he was good to Duggan, exceptionally good to Brutus. And there was, I know I'm repeating myself, but there was a very, very warm side to Hulk. And I think the reason why we kind of knock him is, I'm no psychiatrist, but my sister-in-law is. And she said, maybe he did that because he didn't want to go back to abject poverty.
I could see that.
Huh?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I always thought about that. Like, he was at one point living out of a van and all this other stuff, and, he never wanted to kind of go back to that.
In Pensacola Beach with the Samoans. Like I said, I used to go into, I was lucky in Florida because there was 2 ends, the Florida territory and then there was the Gulf Coast. And because I had been Ken Lucas's partner, I meant something in the Gulf Coast. So I remember going to Pensacola for another show when he was living on Pensacola Beach in a van with Brutus and the Samoans, and they were showering at the beach and living on the beach and living really like nomads and enjoying their life. So maybe when he got the position he got, he understood that he didn't want to go back to being poor, but he didn't forget the people that got him to the dance, meaning his family and extended family. So I do have a lot of respect for Hulk on that way. Maybe, fear drives us in a lot of different ways. And maybe the fear of being poor made him the great politician that he was. You know what I'm saying?
100%, yeah. Never wanted to go back to that life.
I always kind of remember when he took me to see his father. And that night, we went out to, after we saw his father, we went to a sushi bar. And he paid always for everything. I said, no, not tonight. I'm paying for you because you're a good son. And he really appreciated it because not many people ever picked up the check for him. And I did that because I saw what he did for his father. That he'd go over every night and see his old man. And I wanted him to know that I appreciated what he did for his father. Because when it was nothing like what Hulk did. But when I kind of made it in Florida, I used to rent a condo for my mom and dad on the beach for a month. And I try to pay back to them what they did for me. And Hulk later on had a lot of pressure from outside influences. And he had a lot of people on his payroll when he was married to Linda. His brother-in-law was on the payroll, his father-in-law was on the payroll, his mother-in-law was on the payroll, and I don't know who else was on the payroll, but he was pulling a heavy train. So my hat's off to Hulk on that. And then later on, maybe we've kind of knocked him. We've knocked him. Being the ultimate politician, but maybe there was a reason. And I always, as I've gotten older, I've given the people a benefit of the doubt. Because what would I have done in this situation? I probably wouldn't have handled it as well as he did. But I did learn something from Hulk about keeping the difference between, I think, Hulk and I was I kept guys jobs that could work. Like Barb, Ming, Bobby Eaton. I got Mike Grammer's job in WCW. I wanted to pay back guys that helped me. I didn't pay it back like Hulk did for those guys, but I understood that guys that were loyal to you, you couldn't turn your back. And I saw a lot of guys do that. And I think it was because, too, when I was young, I had some mentors that were very good people. Ken Lucas. I was lucky enough that the second NWA territory I ever went, first one was in Georgia. I got booked by Bobby Shane to go to. Bobby happened to like me very much. He was going into Pensacola to be a heel, and he wanted me to work with him. And when I went there, because of Bobby's influence, I got to go with Ken Lucas, who was a lot. There'd be no Ricky Morton if there wasn't a Ken Lucas. He did the same thing for Ricky that he did for me. And Ken was a very loyal guy. So I was around some decent human beings. And I saw that if you got into a position, don't forget the people that brought you to the dance, because the first time WCW ran Mobile, Ricky and Robert were on the card, and they had a run-in. And I went to Kenny and I said, Kenny, I want you to hit the ring and make it Ken Lucas come back. And brother, he did. And he hadn't been in the business. He'd been out of the business for about 5 or 6 years. And it made him feel good about himself. And I treasure those moments that I did the right thing. I'm sure I did much. The bad outweighed the good that I did, but I tried to put myself in the people's positions that Ken didn't have to accept me the way he did. He would sell for me and give me a tag when I was a green, and he was a major. It's like I told you about the time I went to San Francisco, and they brought Ray Stevens in. That was the experiences following Ray Stevens was insurmountable. He was, to me, the greatest worker of all times. And he comes in to be my partner, and I went to him and I said, Mr. Stevens, what do you want me to do to give you the tag so you can wrestle against Smirnoff and one of the other foreigners, whether it was Kurt Von Brauer or Carl Von Brauer, I'm not sure. He said, no, kid, this is your time now. I'll do the Sullivan and give you the tag. People were very good to me, and I tried not to forget that. You know, I had a fucking, you can cut that out, but I had a strange relationship with Lou Tez. Lou was coming into Florida in and out in his waiting days, and Eddie always took care of him. And I actually was in a 6-man tag with him with Jersey Joe Walcott, the former. Do you know who he is?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh, yeah, heavyweight champion, boxing heavyweight champion of the world. And I used to come in, and how I got over Lou Thez, I said, first that night I was going to be his partner. I said, listen, kid, I'm going to sell for you, give you the tag. And Lou backed up like, what? And he said, I like you. Call me kid. I love it. So, I mean, I think that somehow some people lost respect for the guys that came before us. You're a big baseball fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can throw numbers out at you. We all know them. 714, 406, 56, you know, Williams 406, DiMaggio 56. We don't really know our history, but I prided myself on knowing our history, and I always went out of my way to be very, very gracious to those guys that came before us.
When Hulk went to go train, he picked, I guess, Hiro Matsuda would be the guy. Was that the right choice? Because obviously at first he breaks his leg, and then was Hiro Matsuda the right guy to start him off in the business?
Okay, think about this. This is what, 1973, 4, with Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
They broke in. Hiro came from Nagasaki. So that where they dropped the second bomb?
Right.
Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So he, even though he married an American woman, he had this scarring of the World War II. And he was very, very tough. I mean, I had the unfortunate or fortunate, whatever way you want to look at it. On Sundays, they used to go to Heroes. This is when we were off on Sundays. I was there when they didn't run Florida on Sundays then. Probably 6 months when I was into Florida, they started running Sundays. They switched the towns around. Orlando used to be a Monday night town, and they switched it to Sunday. And guys would go down and shoot with Hero and Tony Charles, Carl Gotch, Jody Hamilton. I mean, not Jody Hamilton, Jody Malenko, who was as legit as any American I ever saw. And you want to hear a funny story?
Oh, yeah.
So God says, hey, you wrestle amateur? I said, yeah. He said, go on the bottom and I'll go on top and let's see what you can do. So I get in position, he gets on top of me. I forget who goes go. I think it was Tony. Kyle takes his fingers, sticks one in my belly button. Have you ever had someone stick their finger in your belly button?
No, never.
Try that someday to yourself.
Interesting.
Because you're not going to do it forcefully. He stuck one finger, his left hand, in my belly button, and 3 fingers into my ass. I was paralyzed. Then I get a wonderful chance to wrestle Tony Charles. He goes to suplex me. I think I know how to block it by sticking the foot in, behind the knee. He takes me down and drives his shoulder into my eye socket. It was like a cartoon. Wah, wah, wah. So Bobby Shea was still alive, and he came to me and says, "Don't you think you should be on Sundays learning to work rather than learning to get beat up?" So Matsuda had that thing in him, and back in those days, Eddie never used a local boy except Paul Orndorff, Guy Blair. They broke Ricky Steamboat in the business because Mike beat Ricky for the Florida title in amateur, I think by a point. And then Ricky became the next year. Mike was a senior. Ricky was a junior. The next year, Ricky won the Florida title. But Ricky didn't spend any time in Florida that I remember, a very short time. And then they sent him to Atlanta. And that group of guys, being Hero, Roop, there was a guy called George McQuarrie, who was a great amateur wrestler. You wouldn't know it if you looked at him. He had a Larry Fine type haircut, right? And he was as tough as nails. And these guys, and the Briscoes would be there. But they were very, not nice to the guys, but not as vicious as these other guys. And they would film this shit. And I would see. And once in a while on YouTube, it will pop up with Roop beating guys up. Unmercifully, they beat these guys up. One time, I think I've told you this story. One time a guy came in. He wanted to be a wrestler. He brought his girlfriend in. He had a mask. He wants to wrestle Roop. And he leaps over the top rope. And Roop pulverized him. Got the sugar on him. I don't know if many people know what that hold is. It's you get a guy prone and you put your hand, he pushes right hand up by his head, and then you reach through underneath his neck and get the left one, and then you start spinning it to the left. Well, it chokes you out just like a sleeper. They beat this guy up so bad that when he tried to fight back, he's bleeding, screaming, blood coming out of his nose and ears. Roop put the boots to him, ripped his clothes off, and the guy ran down the street. Out of the building, down the street, in the main street, there was Kennedy. The cops were coming by, and they saw him on the corner of Kennedy in Albany. They said, pulled over, said, "Where's the accident?" He said, no, I was down here wrestling. This is how much stroke Eddie had. The cops came by. I was there. I didn't participate in this, but I was there because you bring the young boys down to watch this, Eddie. And the cops came in, and I said, "Oh, they're going to arrest everybody here." And the cops said, "Eddie, whatever you do is okay, but don't strip these guys." That's how much stroke Eddie had.
Wow.
So they must have liked help because he left with his clothes on, even though his leg was broken.
Yep, true.
And they saw something in him too. I mean, even then he wasn't as big as he was later on. But how do you not see money in a guy like him? At the time he had the long blonde hair. He looked fabulous. He was a wrestling fan. He was not a smart ass. But to break his leg, it was that they wanted to protect their business so much they never wanted anybody walking around and saying, "Oh, I'm a wrestler from the local area," unless you were Paul Orndorff, those guys I mentioned. The worst thing I ever did to anybody, and I hated this, but I had to do it. Somehow a guy got on to do enhancement. And Eddie used to come to TV on Wednesday mornings, and the guy came up to me, and he was in earshot of Eddie. And he said, "I'm a butcher." He said, "But when I go home today and it shows on Saturday, I'll tell the guys that you were very nice to me." I said, "Oh," and he said, "I'm going to make you look fabulous." I said, "Okay." And he said, "Kevin, if this guy doesn't bleed, you're gone." So I took the guy in the ring. I could wrestle amateur a little, so I took him, then all of a sudden the door opens where you come out of the dressing room and Eddie's standing there. And Eddie must have told this kid to get a chair because he rolled out of the ring, got a chair, and wanted to hit me with it. I kicked him, and I took that chair and laced him. And, I mean, I knocked him out, cover him, 1, 2, 3. I get back to the dressing room, and he said, "What took you so long?" Boy, they really protected their business. And now I look back at it and I think, how crazy was that? These guys had a dream that they wanted to be in the wrestling business. But these other guys that had the business understood that if they opened the doors to just anybody, it would kill their business because it was so localized, JP. Do you know what I mean by that? You understand what I'm saying, localized?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When a guy that, after I hit him with the chair, he didn't go to work for a few days, he got a bandage on his head, they're starting to say, well, that wrestler has to be real. And it's amazing that, here's the thing, Orndorff, I've always said to people, if you want to see how to be a great heel, do you remember when Paul Orndorff would get a guy in the corner and start kicking him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He'd go from first, second, to third, then he'd start a fifth gear. And when he was wrestling against these guys, okay, the first couple of weeks, because like I said, we were all supposed to go down there and watch this shit. After a few weeks, he started holding his own. And Brian Blair did the same thing. But after Blair and Orndorff, there was another guy, John Michalowicz. He played football for I believe the Giants. And he was a local guy. And they used him, but they only used him under a mask. So it was a completely different era where it was a local place. And you got to remember, think about this. When I was there was only one sports team in the whole state, and that was the Dolphins, and they came late, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the dance. So there are 3 football teams, 2 baseball teams, 2 hockey teams, and a basketball team. So they had the entertainment market cornered, and they didn't want to give an inch. So times were obviously completely different, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I don't know how I got all the soliloquy about this from Hulk, but yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and breaking your leg and coming back, all the props in the world, dude. All the props in the world.
So really, I do another podcast called The Hogan Era, and I cover 84 to 93, all Hogan, all his feuds, all the business, how much money he made. I try to cover as much as I can with him. I mean, obviously, the Babe Ruth of wrestling, the God of wrestling, he kind of set it off. Without him, I don't know where wrestling would be today. I don't know if Vince would be a billionaire, but I wanted to kind of fast forward really to 1994. Like, how does he get into WCW? I know, obviously, Rick is involved in Bischoff, but you're involved too. How do you get Hulk?
I'll tell you who was, and I've heard various stories, but there are a lot of guys that low-key themselves. You know what I mean? In the wrestling business, that never got the credit they deserved. Mike and Hulk were friends, even though he got his leg broken in Florida. And this is when he was doing Thunder in Paradise.
Great show, yep.
Yeah, and Mike and him bumped into each other, and Mike was asking, "What are you doing?" And I'm not saying that Mike had anything to do with the negotiations, but Mike and I were very close, as you know. Came to me and said, "I talked to Hulk. I think we could get him." And now Rick and Eric went to meet him in Orlando at that very famous sushi bar. I can't remember the name right now. But who is his co-star there? It was Jack Lemon's kid. Chet Lemon, was that his name?
Jack Lemon's. I'm trying to remember his name, but obviously it was Jack Lemon's kid.
You remember that? That it was Jack Lemon's kid?
Yep.
And they went out to lunch, and the next thing I know, we're doing TV. I don't know if it was Disney or Universal at the time.
Chris
all
Lemon.
Of a sudden,
Chris Lemon.
All of a sudden, I'm sitting in the dressing room, and in walks Hulk. Yeah, I just came by to say hello, guys, and I thought, nah. And he looked at me and he rolled his eyes on the top of his head, right? Goes, yeesh. I said, oh, okay. And I think there was a lot of people instrumental, but I think it was one of those coincidences where Hulk and Mike bumped into each other, and Mike opened the door, not saying that he wouldn't have come anyway. But I think Hulk respected Mike because of his father, which we all did. And, Mike had a hard job to follow a successful father, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Mike wasn't the biggest of all guys. But Mike was a very loyal guy, too, because every territory I ever went, until I went back to Florida, Mike would get on a plane, get himself booked in whatever territory I was in, and he would do a job for me. So he didn't have to do that, but he knew that when we were partners, I was the one dropping the fall, I was the one selling, I was the one blading. So I think Hulk had a lot of respect for Mike, and I think when Mike probably came back and said to Eric and Rick, hey, you guys need to hook up with Hulk, I think he'd go. And I think people thought, nah, that ain't going to happen. But after they had the meeting at the sushi bar, from my understanding, it kind of broke down the barrier. And next thing we know, we got Hulk Hogan. But I look at things in a different light now, John, as time goes by. Remember when we first had him and he had the parade in Disney?
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
That was so, to me now, cheesy. I think we should have had, if I look back, a big press conference. Hulk dresses the Hulkster, but we should have had, in my head, we should have had if we couldn't get the real Japanese press, we should have had Japanese press because, hey, he was a huge star in Japan, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
We should have had Japanese press there. We should have had, and again, it didn't have to be the real press. We should have had Canadian press. We should have had Mexican press. We should have had South American press. We should have, and they should have been asking questions and who do you want to wrestle and blah, blah, blah. I think there's, times have changed, and I think they thought that was the right thing to do. I always thought if they had presented him as who and how influential he was, would have been better than a parade and a wave in Disneyland. Because to me, Disneyland is fantasy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep. They almost treat him like he was a ride.
Yeah.
Like a new ride.
Yeah.
So you didn't like anything about the Disney thing? You'd rather just do a traditional press conference?
I would have done an over-the-top press conference. I thought Turner should have been there. I thought Hank Aaron should have been there. You got to realize that wasn't Aaron senior vice president in name only.
Yeah.
Here's at the time he had the record of most home runs, right? And Turner could have said, I got 2 Hall of Famers here and 2 record breakers or record standards. He owned the Falcons at one time too, correct?
Yes.
And he owned the Hawks.
Yep.
So we should have had, and we owned the Braves, we should have had, besides Hank, like John Smoltz or going on the line, Chipper Jones and whoever from the Falcons and whoever was teams that Turner owned should have been applauding Hulk coming over, I thought. And make it more serious rather than, like you said, I never thought of that, but, we got a new ride opening.
The way it was presented, it almost felt like, hey, we're at Disney. We got this new attraction, and it's Hulk Hogan.
Right. I agree with you 100%.
It's pretty great. Like, as soon as he gets there, he's feuding with Flair, and we're getting the dream matches that we thought we were going to get at WrestleMania 8 and, in WWF. I know we got the MSG matches and a few others, but we really wanted that one-on-one huge match, and we're finally going to get it at Bash of the Beach 94. Huge buy rate, and I know the business they do afterwards on TV is great with Clash of Champions and Saturday Night. But was that the idea? Like, as soon as he gets in, we want him to be the world champion, and we want to book him against Ric Flair?
I think so. And you got to remember one thing. You remember what I've talked to you about the nauseum? It's called wrestling, but the next word is business. You got to remember, I may be wrong here, but I think he was the only wrestler that had a personal service contract with Ted Turner. You see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
Turner ain't going to hire a guy on a personal service contract unless he's the guy. So I think that was, and Ted was a big wrestling fan. And I think that he understood, I think Turner understood that maybe they didn't get the match people thought, up in New York, right, which you just said. But down south, people, it was funny. If you go back and watch their first matches, Hogan wasn't a complete babyface because of Rick in the South. It was like a little bit of a civil war still, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It was like, I'll give you an example. When you told me about Nash beating Goldberg that the people popped?
Yep.
I went back and watched that on YouTube. You're absolutely right. I don't know if it was because of Nash being over so big. I'm sure that had something to do with it all. They were there for a title switch. and beating the undefeated guy. But it was the same thing with Hogan and Flair. There was a lot of people that were NWA fans that disliked the product, and Rick was their guy.
I totally agree. And when Hulk comes over, he wins the title. But not only does he bring himself over, he brings over Hulkamania, which is instant credibility, toys, marketing, the big names. Everybody's interested really in WCW, but they're really interested in the business of Hulk Hogan. And I've heard many toy manufacturers say it, and a lot of marketing people say it wasn't so much WCW versus WWF. It's like wherever Hulk lands, that's where we're going to kind of be, right?
Yeah. Did you ever see that short documentary on the toys that made us?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You ever see the Robbie Kane off?
Mm-hmm. Your buddy, yeah.
Talk about
Yep.
Yeah. I was on a plane with Robbie, and that's how we met. And Robbie said, you guys got Hulk Hogan. I have friends that own the San Francisco New Toy Makers, I think it was called. San Francisco. It was either San Francisco Toy Makers or the new San Francisco Toy Makers. And Robbie said, I can get this deal done if you guys get Hogan. That was the first doll deal we ever got.
Oh, it was big time, yeah, because before that they had Galoob, but Galoob is a very, very small-time company compared to what WCW would become as far as getting these bigger deals and better deals.
Right.
And it's funny.
And the open Go ahead.
I was going to say people talk about like WWF and Vince having all these great deals. Jakks Pacific was terrible. THQ was their games was terrible. WCW was getting the better games and the better action figures.
Yeah.
Because of Hogan.
This is a sidebar, Don. Do you know Vince gave me a doll? This is probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Remember the Legend dolls with Andre and Snooker, and I don't know how that ever happened.
Crazy, I didn't know that.
Have you ever seen the figure?
No, I don't remember it.
It's probably the best figure being around, and I don't know why, but it sells pretty good on the internet. It's me in the robe, and I really don't know how I got it. They called me one day, and they threw a figure out of me, and they actually told me, I don't know, it's bullshit, that it's equal to what they gave everybody else. In fact, I was in the top 3, and I thought, what was that for? But, you're absolutely right. At this time, those dolls were red hot, and the crazy thing about those dolls, I don't know how many dolls they put out that were duplicate except for the tights. You remember that? The boots? There'd be a doll of guys with red tights on and red boots. And then there would be a doll, black tights, black boots, doll blue, and then they gave you that vibrating doll.
Oh,
Most
yeah.
people supposed to use that vibrating doll.
Terrible.
I hope I help people out.
Yeah, right. I was just looking it up. Your classic superstar figure, WWE, is going for $300. Somebody's selling it for. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. A lot has to do with, obviously, the Hulkster, but it's funny. In 94 and 95, you guys obviously have the Faces of Fear, or the 3 Faces of Fear, which is you, Kevin, obviously it's Kevin Sullivan, and Avalanche and the Butcher. You guys wrestled David Sullivan, Hogan, and Sting at Clash of Champions 29. You guys have a house show match, same match in Orlando, Florida. And then you and the Butcher wrestle Hogan and Savage on Clash of Champions 30. So it's funny. It's like everything is kind of coming along, as far as you're feuding with Hogan. But at what point are you starting to see that Hulkamania may not be as over in 94, 95? As the 3 Faces of Fear are feuding with him, as Flair is feuding with him. Are you guys starting to notice?
Well, the 3 Faces of Fear, I can remember when I came up with that. I was on the boat the boat JJ and I have debated about, right?
Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
I was on my boat, and I was by myself, and I was supposed to go fishing. I said, I need to think, because we had a lot of guys down. I think wasn't Arn hurt then, and Rick, there was something where he was not sure what he was going to do or whatever, but we didn't have the heels to go against him. And I thought, well, what can we do? And I came up, the Three Faces of Eve, the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I came up with that idea, and I said, well, he'll be comfortable working with Brutus and John, and we'll go from there, and we'll be a stopgap for a while until everybody gets healthy or their contracts are right, and I can put the Horsemen back together. But during this time, too, there was a time where I shaved Hulk's mustache, right? Later on, when I had Curtis, and Curtis was bellowing, he took the, he took the whiskers off the great white Bengal tiger. He has lost his power. I mean, we were into fantasy bullshit. And on one hand, on the other hand, the reality of Rick and the Horseman. So what you asked me, the question you asked me about was, when did I see Hulk, John?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Thunder in Paradise?
Oh, of course.
Very well, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're on television, you have to, or at those days, you had to be a certain size. Hulk had lost a lot of weight. Hulk also was probably the first time that his back injury started to show. And I saw him do an interview where he's hunched over. He was no longer 6'7" or whatever he's supposed to be. He was more like 6'3". He was a lot thinner. He didn't have the 22-inch pythons. And I said, wow, we got to really camouflage this. And then when I saw it right from the beginning, I think. But I chose not to recognize it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's like, I always mention this. Ali's I mentioned it to you just recently, where Ali's last 9 fights, he lost to Trevor Burbank, he lost to Spinks, he lost to Larry Holmes. The other 6 fights that he won, there was no knockouts. So we were giving him the benefit of the doubt, especially the fight with Jimmy Young. Because we don't want to see our heroes torn down. We'd love to tear them down, but when they come back up, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's what was going with Hogan. He wasn't the Hulk of old, and this isn't knocking him at all. But say your prayers, take your vitamins, have one thin. Was this right after the steroid trial?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now people know he admitted on Arsenio Hall that he took steroids, but then he says, it's like Bill Clinton. Yeah, I smoked marijuana, but I didn't inhale. Bullshit. Come on. I mean, and then he said, I only took it 3 times to heal. Well, it opened a crack on him. And I saw that right from the beginning. A guy that said this, say your prayers, take your vitamins, live the little Hulksters. I thought, wow, it's like one of those people, the mega churches that you need to give me money because God wants me to be flying in jets, my private jets and stuff. It was like, whoa, the curtain fell down in front of him. It's like the Wizard of Oz. don't trust that man behind the curtain. But, well, if I see this, does everybody else see it? And then the famous line I've told you about when he was in Chicago, when they booed him out of the building, Gene Okerlund, who is so smart, said, they're booing because of the somber mood here. For some reason, Hogan was dressed all in black. Do you remember that? With the black bandana, the black shirt, the black pants, and the black cross? I thought, wow. He doesn't even know what he's doing, but he said you need to be in the heel.
And I know we have in the archives a complete episode dedicated to Dungeon of Doom, and we talk about the Doomsday Cage from Uncensored 96 and the whole feud there. But kind of how did you, like you said, with the black, how did you talk him into turning heel and doing the NWO? Because it seems like he did not want to do it.
I've told the story 1,000 times. At that period of my life, I was living a mile at most from the Ocean Center, Atlantic Boulevard. Okay? Kevin Nash lives down on Atlantic Boulevard, right off Atlantic Boulevard. And I just said to him, brother, it's time. You got to turn heel. And everybody, as soon as I would leave the room, everybody, and I'm not going to name names, but people very close to him said, he's trying to kill you. Hey, what about your TV deals? What about your doll deals? What about your T-shirt deals? What about this? Oh, he's trying to kill you. So finally, he came to me and said, we do really need to talk about this. So him and I sat down and we talked. We went someplace to have, again, at that time, his favorite meal was sushi. So we went to have sushi. And I said to him, he told me what everybody's saying. I said, Hulk, I've known you from the very beginning. You've trusted me up until this point. Do you think I cut my own throat? I said, you don't want to see it. And you have yes men around you. And they don't want to lose their jobs. I said, you gotta turn heel. And when he said, okay, I said, the night before the show, I want you to stay at my house. And I told you the thing. Peter, or whatever his name was, his agent came. I had a 3-bedroom house at the time, on the water. So I told Hulk, you guest best, there's 2 guest best, 2 guest rooms. I said, you sleep in this one, and Peter goes to sleep in the other one. I said, you're not sleeping in the other one, you're sleeping on the couch. And I kept the door open so I could hear if he was going back and forth. Till 2 a.m, Peter was trying to talk me out of turning him heel. I said, brother, it's too late now. I go to bed. We get up. We have coffee. We have whatever. Peter's still trying to talk me out of it. Now I see Hogan, Emmett, and Hart. So I said, Peter, why don't you go downstairs, take a walk on the beach, and let me and Hulk talk. I said, brother, you think I would do you wrong? He said, well, I'm not sure. I said, listen, you're not sure about me, or you're not sure about the angle? I said, no, I'm not sure about the angle. I said, Hulk, you can always turn back baby face, but this is the only thing that makes sense. I've heard Sting, I've heard, who's the big black gentleman that they talk about sometimes from WWE?
Ahmed Johnson?
Mabel?
Oh, Mabel.
No, Mabel.
The third man. Yeah, Mabel. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, all these guys. There was no contingency plan there. In my head, anyway. Maybe somebody else made a contingency plan. But I said to him, oh, the only thing that makes this thing work is you're the king of the WWF. How can you have Sting, who's homegrown WCW? How can you have Mabel? I said, you are going to be the focal point and revive you. Because I had seen Hulk work with Inoki. He was a great heel. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
In Japan?
Oh, yes.
I said, you got to just go back to that. And these guys have laid the foundation. I said, it's going to blow the roof off the house. And he said, well, let me think about it. I said, no, there's ain't thinking here, baby. We're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And if you're not going to do it, tell me now, because I'm going to have to figure out something. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to have Nash and Hall be the three baby faces. He said, what? I said, yeah, I'm going to go put as much heat on them, because, my thing is heat draws. And he said, you go that far? I said, yeah, I'd go that far, because if you are in our board, what do you think's going to happen when the NWO comes at your door? And he had never thought about that. It was, without me saying it was, I said, the train's leaving the station. You're either on the train or you're going to be in the dust of the train. And that's when he said, I'll do it. And I kept him in the house because, like I said, it was a mile down the road, right? And I'm going to be there at the end of the month at the Ocean Center. I told him, brother, you either jump on this train or the train's pulling out of the station. And he said, okay. So I kept him until the first match got on. I was watching TV. When the first match went on, we got into his limo. We drove down. I kept everybody away from him. I kept him in the limo till about the semi-final. And then I said, okay, let's go do it. And then Nash and Hall were terrific, because you got to realize here's the biggest star ever in the history of pro wrestling, and they got Nash and Hall are the lead guys, and they embraced Hulk with open arms at that time. And then, if you watch when Hulk comes down and after the finish, they were in their ankles with trash, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah. So I think it was the right thing. Every move he made up until maybe later on in the business, leaving AWA when he should have been the champion there, right?
Yep.
He goes to New York and takes his crew with him, right? He comes to WCW, brings his crew, but then turns heel and hooks up with the two most charismatic guys you possibly could hook up with. And then it was Katie by the door. And I don't think there'll ever be another NWO faction. That's why I think that, I may be wrong, but it's been wrong a lot. I don't think these factions today draw. You know why, John?
No heat?
No, it ain't just that. It's that when you see them, you think, oh, they're a rip-off the NWO.
Oh, yeah.
They're not.
For sure.
It's the NWO.
Yep.
You reinforce negatives, you know what I mean?
So on the show before, we've talked about creative control, we've talked about the end of WCW, we've talked about everything. But what is the legacy of Hulk, including WCW, WWF? What's the big legacy? I know Hall of Famer, world champion 6 times over in WCW, 6 times over in WWF, 2-time WWE Hall of Famer. But what do you think the legacy is?
Well, I'll tell you what I think his legacy is. I used to tell my kids when they were very young, every night when you say your prayers, say one for Hulk, because you wouldn't be living this lifestyle if it wasn't for him.
True.
Yeah. I pulled into my driveway one time when they were a little bit older, and I thought I was in a car lot. I was the only one that only had one car. I saw Yukons, I saw Denali's, I saw Mustangs, I saw MGB Antiques. I saw a Jaguar. I pulled up with a a Chevy 1500 truck that was banged up. I said, "What am I doing wrong?" And that's the thing. He made everybody's life better. I'm not saying politically and all that shit that happened later, but because of him, guys in AEW are making $2 million. Would I be wrong and you be wrong saying I probably think that Roman and Brock got $2.5 million for the night?
Yep, I agree.
It's a better payoff than the $40 guaranteed to the town.
Yep, I totally agree. Well said. Perfectly said.
Yeah, and and that's the truth. I used to say to my kids, say a prayer for Hulk, because you wouldn't be living this lifestyle if it wasn't for him. I mean, I had an acre on the water in the Florida Keys, so and I had a 1,200 square foot guest house. So I thank him for what he did for the wrestling business. And I also think that the young guys have to thank the guys that came before them. I mean, WWE was on its last legs until Rock and Stone Cold and Mr. McMahon character, and all these guys that came before them saved wrestling. Hulk started it, but all these other guys came along, and you can be damn sure that in 5 years, maybe 7 years, that Roman Reigns is going to take The Rock's place for a Rock-produced movie, and will take Rock's place as the number one guy in Hollywood, because The Rock is smart enough to understand he's going to pass the torch, and he's going to pass it to a relative, and he's going to make buku money off the relative, and the relative will make buku money too. That's one thing. And the other thing about Hulk, he wanted everybody to make money.
And that's a great stopping point. Well said. Love it. Let's head towards the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tnptempire.com. Of course, Pro Wrestling Tees, prowrestlingtees.com. Visit the Kevin Sullivan store. And Instagram, you can follow Kevin at Taskmaster Talks. Kevin, what else you got going on?
At the end of the month, actually, it's not this weekend, next week, the 2 weekends, I mean, whatever the dates are, I'm going to be in Daytona Beach at the Ocean Center. And I'm really looking forward to this, JP, because I opened the Ocean Center, with Bad News Brown, who's Bad News Allen, in a third match. 2 men enter, 1 man leave. And that was home for me for quite a long time, and I have very good memories of the Daytona Beach area. So I'm looking for friends to come out and say hello to me. And the other thing is, JP, I told you this before, I've had a lot of people everywhere I've been going, whether it was Texas, I'm going to the big event. I was in Ohio late every place I've been, everybody has come to me and said they love our podcast. So if you do and you like it or you don't like it or you got a bone to pick with me about the program, I'll just blame JP. But come and tell us, just go and tell us that you enjoy the program. Because I think, I don't get to tell you this enough. You're doing a hell of a job, brother, and you're balancing a lot of podcasts, and they're all terrific. And the reason why they're terrific is because you're a good guy, JP.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate such the kind words. Thank you.
Well, it's the truth. It's the truth, my friend.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everybody out there for listening. We'll see you right back here for a little Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan next week. We'll see you next week, folks.